Welcome to the Clause YouTube channel.
Together, we strive for a safer, secure, and more stable world.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to yet another episode of Clause YouTube channel, Strategic Frontlines. And today we have with us Major General Mehra. We have with us Major General Mehra, retired. He Kirti Chakra AVSM VSM, and he's an expert on Russia and CEO of Thorsec Global. Please also welcome Mr. Manoj Kewalramani. He is the chairperson of Indo-Pacific Studies program at Takshila. He is a China expert and the author of the book Smokeless War: China's Quest for Geopolitical Dominance. I welcome both of you to the podcast today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Today we'll discuss SCO, its relevance, and also since we have a China and a Russia expert, so we are also going to discuss India-China relations and India-Russia relations post Op Sindoor. So first, starting with SCO, as we all know, that SCO is an intergovernmental organization which was formed in 2001, and India became a full member in 2017. It also assumed the rotating chairmanship in 2023. And economically, if we see that this bloc, we find that it has about 30% of the global GDP and 40% of the world's population is here. So it's quite an important group. We have 10 members, 4 from Central Asia. Then we have Russia, China, India, Pakistan, Iran, and recently Belarus joined. So SCO was in news because India's National Security Advisor, Ajit Doval, attended the 20th meeting of the Secretariat of the Security Councils of the SCO on 23rd June. And subsequently, the Defence Minister, Shri Rajnath Singh, also attended the SCO Defence Ministers meeting on 25th, and today also it was going on in China. The agenda as far as the National Security Advisory thing is concerned, it revolved around push for stronger institutional mechanism under the SCO, that is RATS, that is the Regional Anti-Terrorist Structures. And also we highlighted that decisive action should be taken against UN-proscribed terror groups like Lashkar-e-Toiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed. I would like to first ask, therefore, Mr. Kewalramani, since the defense minister, when they had the meeting, we refused to sign a joint declaration as India was not satisfied with the language of the joint document. And there was no mention of the cross-border terrorist activities. And if we see that we had throughout highlighted a firm stand on terrorism, where we stressed on cooperation on one side, but at the same time, we also stated that the accountability should be there. Those are the two key pillars. We know that SCO is more China-centric, and we have seen that it was also a mouthpiece where they talk a lot about GSI, that is the Global Security Initiative. So what do you feel? Is the organization really relevant in case, for example, if we are we going to be benefited? As India's approach is often different, and there is a subtle grouping of China, Pakistan, which may not allow us to work as we want. But at the same time, we can also say that it is better to be inside and build a narrative. So what are your views on the entire gambit of this summit?
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me here. I think that if you look at the SCO, it's a grouping which is still looking for an identity in some ways. And I think the identity of the group over the last 25, 30 years, actually, even before the SCO, there was another incarnation. It has been, like you said, China-centric. Today, I think there's a search for an identity. And the identity is essentially something that China and Russia both seem to be trying to shape, which is in alignment with their strategic interests vis-a-vis the US and the West. It's also somewhere looking for an identity to carve out some sort of a security architecture within Eurasia. But I don't think that there is clarity in terms of what the objectives are. And that's largely because there are different interests of different entities within the group. Different groupings. If you think of just China, and, India, and Pakistan, they're obviously very different on the opposite side of the pole. If you think of China and Russia, there are certain congruences, but there are also certain differences in terms of how they look at Central Asia, in terms of even how they look at Pakistan or Afghanistan. Yet, I think the objective is to try and get key players within this broader landmass together to try and carve out some sort of a security architecture. Primarily, of course, focusing on right now, for the longest time, dealing with terrorism. Even in terrorism, the objective is to essentially focus on what the Chinese interests are, and to try and make sure that China's periphery and its borders remain secure. So in that sense, one can make the case that India is an outlier in that group. But on the other side, like you said, right, it is better to be on the table, particularly when the continental landmass that India is sort of joining is increasingly volatile, right? The US withdrawal from Afghanistan created a new environment in the region. Today, the war between Israel and Iran creates a new dynamic. The role of Pakistan begins to shift again. So I think it's really important for India to be on the table while these conversations are happening. But I think we should keep our expectations from the SCO very, very limited. I think being on the table, making our objections is worth it. When that stops being worth it is when you start potentially facing costs if the relationship between the US, Russia, and China worsens to the extent that it starts to cost you. At present, I don't see that is the case where it is costing us. So to me, therefore, it's worth being on the table. It's worth making your dissent heard. It's worth being part of conversations around issues like terrorism and trying to shape those conversations. And it's worth working with partners within the grouping who may share some of your interests, some of your concerns, whether it's Russia, whether it's Central Asian countries. It's worth being there. My final point is that also being at the SCO allows India and has allowed India access to the table with Central Asian countries, which, as you've seen over the last 5 years, our engagement with Central Asia has changed in material terms, right? Substantively, there is lots more that needs to be done. I think in terms of outcomes, there's lots more that needs to be achieved. But at least it brought us to the table. It created that avenue, and therefore now we see a summit meeting that we have with Central Asian countries. So it's facilitated those sorts of things. So for many reasons, I'm okay with India being part of the SCO. I think it is net beneficial, but I don't think we should expect too much out of it.
I fully agree with you, because even if you see terrorism, it is perceived differently by many countries. So but being there and shaping the narrative and trying to influence people is very important, because if you're not on the table, then you lose out a lot. Now I'd like to bring in Major General Mehra. Recently, Belarus became a member of SCO. So do you feel that the Russia is also trying to balance out China by bringing in countries who are more closer to them? And do you also feel that will it remain only one of the many multilateral organizations with the objective to counter Western alliance, or something substantial will come out of it? So what you feel are the areas where the SCO can contribute, and what are its limitations? You need to unmute your mic.
At the outset, thank you very much for giving the opportunity to be part of this podcast. Just a quick point before we come to Belarus per se. I was there in 2017 in Moscow when India and Pakistan joined SCO as a permanent members. Before that, it was observer status and all. And there was so much of debate. Good, bad, not. But as Manoj brought out, I hope you don't mind calling you Manoj. Please call me Deepak. Yeah, it will be better that way. So there's so much of debate. We were with the diplomatic community, within the embassy, with other countries. Ultimate, the analysis was it is better to be inside, part of an organization which is Eurasian centric, right? And then see, so that's how it all developed. And I think a lot of water has flown under in Muscova River from 17 to 25. Lots of changes have come, and especially after 22. At that particular point in time, India was being brought in, as per the popular perception, by Russia, by the support of Russia, to sort of counter the sort of extra weight that China had in this organization. And China, on its part, made sure that Pakistan got included. But I think over the years, as Russian dependence on China, especially after 22, has increased manifold, this thing maybe has watered down. And I agree with what Manoj has said. Coming on to Belarusia, or known as Belarusia today. Belarusia, by the way, means white Russians or white Rus, right from 13th century onwards. And there is main Russia, there is Belarusia, there is Milorussia, which is supposed to be Ukraine. So it's very interesting history of when you go to history and geography of Russia. It's very interesting. So, Belarusia has been a very steadfast supporter of Russia through thick and thin over many years. To the extent that in the present conflict, the only country where Russia wanted to put the nukes outside Russia was Belarusia, and it borders Poland and Ukraine and Lithuania and some other countries. Now, two, 3 points are there as far as Belarus is concerned about how important it is. Yes, certainly being a steadfast partner of Russia, it gives support to Russia and in that sense to China also. Second, more important aspect is it is uh, it is the first European country, or should I say, East European country, to becoming a full-fledged member of SCO. So from Asian centric totally to being the first European country, so geographic reach beyond Central Asia, beyond other parts of Asia, it has gone, right. Then the location of Belarus itself, it's sorts of a bridge between the Eastern Europe and Russia and beyond, and therefore enhancing the SCO's position as a pan-Eurasian bloc between what should we say, between Europe and the Pacific, right? And now uh, also the Belarus does share the type of governance model that they have, which is more akin to maybe a bit more authoritarian sort of a governance model, which is certainly anti-Western with lots of sanction on Belarusia also. So its inclusion strengthens certainly the Russia and the Chinese aspects of it.
In terms of its contribution, SU's contribution and limitation,
I
you
am
can.
not very sure how much was its marginal, whether it's strategic weight or its margin economic weight is not very much. 80,000 square miles of territory with 9 million people. Apart from the diplomatic aspects of it and the connectivity aspects of it, not much I find to the thing. Also, there is hardly any issues of counter-terrorism or some things like that
No,
towards.
I mean to say from SEO's point of view. So, what can SEO contribute,
Well,
and what are the limitations of SEO?
from SEO's limitation.
Yes.
Well, yes. As far as SEO is concerned, as far as its regional security and diplomacy is concerned, uh, see, why it was formed. It was formed to foster stability in the Central Asia as a Shanghai Five initially, and over the years, the expanded membership has gone to 10 today as we look at Belarusia. So, as far as regional security and diplomacy is concerned, as for counter-terrorism coordination between these nations through the regional anti-terrorist structure, which is headquartered in Tashkent, it is the main element or the main place or main organization that serves as a mechanism for information sharing, intelligence sharing, joint training. However, a common sort of what should we say, ops or something like that is yet to be made. It is still a thing in progress.
Yes.
Also, various other aspects of separatism, extremism, your substance abuses, your cyber threats, cyber terrorism, all these aspects come under the under racks. Also, now natural disasters is one of the major aspects which is being discussed there. So, in that sense, it has got a lot of relevance. Also, under the SCO, there are a number of peace mission exercises being carried out. And I was once again lucky in 2018 when in Chelyabinsk, under the in Russia, in central Russia, in the central military district, the first ever peace mission exercise after India and Pakistan had joined was conducted. And Indian contingent, Pakistan contingent, all participated, and we were there. So under this peace mission exercises, and by the way, we obviously being a little far off, did not get majority of our equipment and utilize the equipment given to us by Russia, but we did get to see the equipment of China, other countries, Kazakhstan, who through trains, because of the land connectivity, got all the equipment through one, two, three trains, and we trained along with them for basic aim of that exercise was again counter-terrorism, extremism, and things like that. So
I
therefore,
think
there
you
is
can, yes, you can learn from each other. I mean, what
learn
are the
from each
good practices?
other.
What are
So,
there? And
yeah.
what Mr. Kewalramani also pointed out, that you interact with the Central Asian countries, which are a very important aspect for us in terms of connectivity or trade, economics, everything. So I would just, moving further, I would like to ask Mr. Kewalramani, I have, moving on to China, since you're also a China expert, and our defense minister is also meeting the defense minister of China. So I have two questions for you. Firstly, we find that during Op Sindoor, there was a China-Pakistan fusion, which was quite evident, whether it was real-time data sharing or supplying of armament or even tactics. So there is a view that often is stated that China is now a proxy, Pakistan is now a proxy of China, and its dependence on China is nearly 80% as far as its defense is concerned. So how we need to prepare in future this thing happens. And secondly, India-China relations are entering what you call it a managed stabilization phase, where disengagement, de-escalation, and politico-military talks have commenced. Both the countries have seen a dialogue between their foreign ministers, defense ministers, and even at NSA level. And Chinese must also be thinking that in future our prime minister will visit China when there is a SCO meet. So, in your opinion, how should we view this relationship progressing, and mainly, what are the areas which we need to be cautious about, and how we need to prepare?
Yeah, no, thank you so much for both those questions. I'll deal with the second question first, which is of the India-China relationship. Look, my view is that a framework and a prism of dealing with China should not be of caution, should be of a certain degree of confidence. I think that we need to engage with China. You cannot disengage with a massive geographical neighbor with whom you have tremendous trade, and trade with whom is also significant for your own development. So I don't think you can disengage. It is a major power, if not a power with global reach in terms of military, but at least from an economic point of view, it is it's some global power. So we have to engage with China. I don't think there is any two ways about that. I think that we need to also engage with China with the perspective that to understand how you will manage that relationship, you will need to try and build equities from an economic point of view in that relationship. You will have to also focus on your own strength. So there's no way that India can arrive at some sort of a new modus vivendi with China without cultivating its own strength. So the first part of that lies in our own economic growth. We have to ensure that firstly our own economic growth sustains. Secondly, on the boundary issues, we need to know that the boundary dispute is not going to be settled anytime soon. Beijing has no interest in settling that dispute. It's likely testing waters and will continue to test waters because it perceives an asymmetric power advantage that it enjoys, and it wants to sort of carve out some sort of a new normal on the boundary, whether that is stymieing India's infrastructure development, whether that is ossifying certain terms which are in its favor. So I think that testing will continue, even in the future. There are moments where it might ease, but that testing will continue. And I think we should be ready for that. And we should also be doing our own level of testing to assess Chinese wherewithal and interest in trying to escalate. We need to invest in our defense much more. I think we are underinvested in defense. I think even in that investment in defense, we need to invest far more in equipment and capital investment rather than so we need to find a better balance between manpower investment and equipment investment, capital investment. So that means that your budgetary allocation for defense needs to go up. Our threat environment is different from a European country's threat environment, and therefore we need to be investing much more in defense. And we can discuss whether that investment needs to be a short-term surge with a sunset clause or a longer-term surge. At the same time, we need to be working with partners, right? India cannot be dealing with China alone. Our objective should be that we work with partners to shape the geopolitical environment within which China operates. Some of those aspects of that work can be transactional, and that it also gives you greater leverage in negotiating with China. The final piece of this, the fourth point, is that we need to be talking to China. We need to be talking to China on a whole host of issues, from security issues, from the boundary issues, to China's engagement in our periphery, and our engagement in China's periphery, to things like climate change, to things like investment and investment scrutiny. We need to have a new sort of strategic and economic dialogue with China. There are some places where we will disagree, that's fine. There are some places where we will agree. But that's what we need to do. You need to engage with China. And I think the process of engagement is you need to first build your strength. So to me, that's how we should be engaging. So to that extent, I think ministerial meetings is useful. I think meetings between the two leaders is also extremely important. But the objective of my argument is that it need not be this informal summitry that we saw in 2018 and 2019. I don't think that's going to work. I think what we need is process-driven, issue-based engagement, which tries to achieve some things. There are some things that we can readily ask China, which are not as large as, backers in the UN Security Council. Something straightforward as, can China support the Convention on Terrorism? Can China join the International Solar Alliance? In return, there are certain things that we can potentially offer. For example, our relationship with Taiwan, there are elements of that we can offer. So I think, there can be transactional engagement on different areas of things. So I think that's how we deal with China. In terms of the China-Pakistan relationship, I think it's important to grasp that this is the relationship between a client and a patron. So Pakistan will be supported because Pakistan serves a strategic purpose for China beyond its own intrinsic value, that it acts as a gateway to the Arabian Sea and the Indian Ocean, and it acts as a potential alternative route for energy supplies, although very expensive route and not proven to be feasible so far. It also serves as a fulcrum that keeps India occupied, that keeps Indian resources occupied, and that keeps India focused and divided in continental security, as opposed to focusing on also maritime power development. So it serves several purposes, right? It keeps India locked into the Indian subcontinent. I think we should expect more such Chinese support for Pakistan, diplomatic, militarily, because it's a strategic asset that China has invested in for the last 50, 60 years now. So I don't think that is going to change. What we need to do is that we need to grasp the fact that this is a patron-client relationship, and all patron-client relationships have their own friction. Pakistan is a client, but it is also a very promiscuous client. It seeks other actors. It seeks the United States because it does not want to also be dependent on one actor wholly and solely. That limits Pakistan's maneuverability. That's a concern that China has. Also, China is concerned about conflagration that can go beyond its control between India and Pakistan. So a limited friction between India and Pakistan serves China. But escalated conflict can actually damage Chinese interests. Significant economic interest in Pakistan, nearly 30 billion worth of investment monies that have gone in, but also the long-term stake in Pakistan, and also overall regional security. So I think we need to also grasp the fact that China's stakes are much more than just containing us, and that also allows us to negotiate, push buttons that we might want to, and I think that's how we deal with that, because there's no way you can change the nature of that relationship fundamentally.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And since we are talking about Pakistan, I would like to bring in Maj Gen Mehra. I wanted to ask you, how is the India-Russia relationship developing, especially post Sindoor? Though the strategic partnership remains very strong, but there are hiccups in between as the engagement of the Russian with the Pakistanis. You tend to see that it has increased in last year or so. But post Op Sindoor, I think there is a surge in pro-Russia sentiment as far as India is concerned, especially the way the air systems had done well. So we have asked for more S-400s. But apart from defense, what are the other areas where you think we should work as far as Russia is concerned? Because we have also diversified our defense procurements and it has also worked so far. So what are you feel, what are the new areas where we should talk with Russia and cement the relationship?
Thank you. I think what Manoj said about about the lack of, the more budget required for the defense. The Mandarins in South Block will be very happy to hear, hear that. And I think there is a need with the not very friendly neighbors on the northern, western, and some others. There is a need for that. And certainly Atmanirbharta, you can't fight with borrowed weapons. That's very clear cut. And yes, so in some sense, Operation Sindoor has been a revelation, in some sense, right? And they say it is during the adverse times that the test of the strength of your alliances or the resolves of one's adversaries and friends do come out in open. And the bold step that India took, and it took with confidence, adds a new layer of sort of, what should I say, complexity to the regional geopolitics. And it and especially this time going to Shanghai Cooperation after a successful conduct of Operation Sindoor, in which, if you look at SCO all around, possibly India was an outlier. You look at Russia, Russia was neutral. So you look at, we start with the other countries, Turkey, Azerbaijan, both are not permanent members, but they are part of SCO, Russia, China, and Pakistan. So all these people were supporting sort of one country, and there India was there to fight on its own, of course, with certain neutral countries. Uh, the diplomacy during this Operation Sindoor and post Operation Sindoor continued, and it is continuing still. But what came out a bit surprising to India was the Moscow's response. Uh, and what was the response? Being a time-tested, long-standing strategic ally of India for very long now, Russian response through Maria Zakharova, their foreign ministry spokesperson, was very well calibrated, formal, and sort of neutral. From top leadership, there was absolutely no statement, sort of non-committal. And subsequently, Maria also said the country should resolve their differences through political and dialogue and diplomatic means, and in accordance with the provisions of the Shimla
Shimla.
Agreement and all declaration and all that. Many of us were surprised, including self, when we first heard, okay, because there were BrahMos, there was Sukhois, there was S-400, the best of what Russia has to offer at display, and very well used by the Indian forces, right? But then diplomacy is all about reciprocity. So we don't have to really go very far to unravel why the response was such. If we go back to February of 2022, when the Russian special operation commenced in Ukraine, where were we? What did we do? Since it is still continuing and it was a little enhanced, so it went all to UN and we abstained and all that. But what were our responses? So I delved into that. Uh, India again portrayed a very sort of a neutral on the course of war. Though it abstained from the UN votes condemning Russia's invasion, that thing never came up between New Delhi and Islamabad. India did refuse to publicly sort of blame Moscow for the crisis, and also emphasized India's traditional respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity, and called for immediate cessation of the violence. If you recall a very famous statement by our Honorable Prime Minister during his meetings and otherwise with President Putin, when he said, "This is not an era of war, but of dialogue and diplomacy." So this is how I think it is sort of, should I say, paid back in the same coin. But overall, I think the warmth and the relationship between the two countries has not diminished. But since 2022, especially, the dependence of Russia over on China has increased quite a bit. All other avenues for Russia's dependence or Russia have been closed, be it West, be it North, and be it in various multilateral fora. Therefore, wherever China is involved, Russia's response is likely to be muted. And with the Western sanctions biting on Russian economy and Russian exports, especially energy exports, it's sort of one commodity economy where a significant share goes to of oil and gas goes to China. Its dependence on China also, I think, puts some restrictions on the Russian responses. Another aspect is the dependence on technology, on the financial investment, be it inside infrastructure, technology, Arctic, or even in the oil and gas sector. Russia is today quite dependent upon China there. Also, both countries have sort of strategic alignment in the sense they both oppose the unipolarity of the US-led West, promoting multipolar world by various forums, be it BRICS, SCO, challenging the norms laid down by the Western-led institutions, be it Bretton Woods and others. So all this does constrain Russia in responding the way it used to respond earlier in these things. Now, where do we fit in Russia's? As you asked, the second question was, where do we fit in between Russia-India relationship? I feel that for Russia, India's partnership, the fourth largest economy, uh, the largest country in the southern Asia, remains very, very valuable. And location itself of India is quite strategic as far as Russia is concerned. However, there are certain limitations to it. As far as defense is concerned, though we have focused a lot on Atmanirbharta and we have succeeded to quite an extent, but with the type of countries that we are facing, no one country can ever fulfill our requirements. Therefore, we have diversified, and but our air defense systems, submarines, BrahMos, spare parts, trainings, and other aspects continue to be majorly uh, being procured from Russia. The energy, that is another aspect. So the number of investment that India has done in Russian oil fields or Russian diamond mines or Russian gas infrastructure in Arctic region with long-term LNG contracts, there is that is likely to continue in the future till long term. Actually, there are long-term contracts, and there are multilateral cooperation as we see in SCO, BRICS, G20, and others. As far as strains are concerned, I think we should, when we look at Russia, Pakistan, you mentioned the relationship, we need to look at this relationship from the prism of a dragon bear embrace, if I may say. Uh, this dragon bear embrace is, I think, one of the most significant potential sort of geopolitical shift in the world order today. Uh, we are wary. Starting from actually 2015-16, we are wary of Russia's growing alignment. I should not say alignment, closeness to China, be it in the military field or in the oil field, in the laying of pipelines field and all. However, all this we should take it with a pinch of salt. There are basically two reasons. One is backed by China, and second is Pakistan's geographical location at the sort of at the crossroads of connectivity between Central Asia, West Asia, and of course South Asia. And the long held Russian view of getting access to the warm waters of Indian Ocean. So that is only Pakistan is the one place through Gwadar port which it can provide. So if you look at it from this particular aspect, so it is not very surprising that they are posing up a bit to that. But the relationship of as far as Russia, and especially after 22, 23, 24, the engagements have since increased a bit because, as I said earlier, other avenues of Russia have almost closed for them. This is the only avenue which they find, or towards China, which they find where they can diversify, where they can move on. So, but as far as India Russia is concerned, the relationship is going to continue. Both need each other. The avenues of approach, apart from what I mentioned earlier in the earlier part, Arctic is another major avenue where both countries have a major stake, and especially now when the Western investments have dried up and India has much to offer to Russia, and vice versa, in the form of hydrocarbons and accesses to that area. Russia has got a lot to offer to India.
I think if we see China-Russia relations also have their own problems. It is just that Russia has been pushed in a corner. It has no option. That's why it is so much dependent on China. Given options, probably that may not be the case. And that is a place where India comes out. Because I'm sure Russia would also not like to be totally dependent on China. And what we can offer to Russia is very different. And I feel that with ups and downs, I think the relationship will become stable. Because what we can offer as far as defense is concerned, economics is concerned, trade is concerned, I don't think Pakistan can give all those things. Having said that, but I would like to bring in here Mr. Kewalramani, and I want to talk to you about China. Now, China has a very good civil-military fusion. I mean, we find that it is really doing very well. And another area where they are doing very well is technology, whether it is AI, whether it is robotics or quantum. They have the first quantum satellite, if you call. They are doing very well in space. So how do you feel? What is the thing which is going right for them that they are doing all those things? And what we should try to adopt? I mean, we should learn from them.
Right. Look, I think we have to understand the evolution of the Chinese tech ecosystem. It started from copying, it's then to adapting, then to localizing, and then to innovating, right? And that process has, and as much as I think we in India don't tend to appreciate this, but that process has a lot to do with being open to foreign capital, foreign technology, foreign talent. For example, for the longest time, there was an NYU campus in Shanghai. In India, we've been very, very closed when it comes to foreign universities. So I've always found it very fascinating that as a communist country, China has been far more pragmatic and open in its embrace of modernity and modern technologies and capital and foreign capital, whereas we have been far more cautious, far more circumspect. So I think that to me is the first thing. That I think India needs to look at being much more open. And that's why when your previous question, you asked about caution, I said, I think we should shift the frame entirely in India of not looking at things with caution, but looking at things with a certain degree of confidence. Of course, political economy plays a role in all of this, to put it mildly. But I think that is the first part. The second part, I think in China, what they've done well is that the Chinese approach to technology development historically has been around product development. Right, has been around application scenarios. So they were not really over a period of time investing in necessarily theoretical research and fundamental research and foundational research. They were looking in application and business scenarios. So foundational research was being done in the West. The Chinese were inviting MNCs and they were looking at application scenarios and therefore creating products. In India, and the Chinese are incentivizing Chinese researchers, and they continue to incentivize Chinese researchers to go to the market to create products which generate money. That incentivizes people, right? In India, partly systemically, but also partly culturally, our researchers don't look at product development. Our researchers enjoy the idea of being in, research labs instead of sort of product creation, right? So to me, that's the second part. The third thing that the Chinese have done well is that they've been able to, and this is partly the nature of the Leninist party state, right? You've been able to bring together private business, universities, other departments, government, and to try and therefore create synergy, create labs, create centers where you can actually do cutting edge work. There's been tremendous taxation and fiscal policy use to try and support research. So companies that invest a significant chunk of their budget in R&D get significant tax breaks. Of course, there is leakage and there is corruption in that process. I can show what I'm not doing is R&D as R&D and still take the tax breaks. That's happening. But they take that as par for the course in terms of cost of doing innovation. Likewise, there has been an increasing acceptance in China that as you try to innovate, even if the state is guiding and supporting funding, and state funding and state prioritization also enables venture capitalist money to come in, and even foreign venture capitalist money to come in, there's a tolerance for failure. In fact, China has something called government guidance funds, which are at various levels, at central level, at local levels. Increasingly, government guidance funds for specific types of innovation are being empowered that even if there is 100% failure, it's acceptable. In democracies, that is very difficult to do. And we saw that, say, if you just go back 15, 17 years ago, the 2G scam, that entire conversation, it tells you that it's very difficult, right? The audit process is very, very challenging, and democracies will find that difficult. So democracies have to figure out their own way to incentivize innovation, and a lot of that has to do with the state enabling market forces to play a role. I think for example, the defense technology cooperation that India has with the US, I think that's a good model. And I think some of that is what we must replicate. The last thing that the Chinese have done well, and this is partly, again, to me, cultural. Chinese enterprises have invested in R&D. So if you just take Huawei as an example, historically, Huawei has spent a substantive amount of its budget in R&D. It has spent its own money. And even today, Ren Zhengfei, who's the head of Huawei, he says, look, we need to keep a certain substantive chunk of our research and development budget for foundational research. There, we should accept failure. The other budget that we have, which is separate, which is probably a little larger, we are keeping that aside for application-based research, product research, and things like that. So I think they seriously are looking at it because they look at it as a aspect of competitive dominance in the future. From a military perspective, I think there is fusion because your companies are being able to do cutting edge work because there is a market for things. If you want Indian companies to develop cutting edge drones and UCAVs and things like that, you need to have a market for them to do this, right? Because they need to, what is the requirement of the armed forces for UCAVs? It's not going to sustain a company for 10 years or 20 years or 30 years. You need a market for them to serve. And those products will be different from the UCAVs that they might make. So I think market creation, which the Chinese do well, and that's where I think the government also has to play a role. So I think there are some of these elements, right? Facilitating R&D investment, open market creation, some sort of tax and fiscal incentive policies. Those are the kind of things that we can learn. What we should not learn is that the government goes and invests heavily because that's not going to work alone in democracies. Government can provide support, but it cannot own.
I agree with you. I think innovation and R&D is the crucial thing there. I mean, our country should spend more money on R&D and the innovation. I would like to bring in Major General Mehra here. You were talking about Atmanirbhar Bharat also. We are doing a lot of things which are very positive, especially in the defense ecosystem has opened up quite a bit for the startups. And we find the culture is also slowly changing. But what Mr. Manoj rightly pointed out, that there has to be a scale. So until the scale is there, the small startups will not be benefited. So how do you think our defense system is doing as of now, and what more they need to do?
Okay, I'll tackle the second part first, what more they need to do. And I will take here the example of Again, the country where I stayed the maximum outside India, that is Russia. Why is it that Russia is producing S-200, 300, 400, 500, 600 also, they're testing now, the best in the world? Why is it that their engines, despite such a huge animosity with the US, US is still importing the most heavy-duty lift engines from Russia itself? Why is it that they're one of the best in the cyber security, offensive, defensive, both ways? So we did a research sort of there. So they have, in certain of these areas, been able to create a wonderful ecosystem. I'll take one example of St. Petersburg University, where Almazante, which produces these air defense systems, is located. What ecosystem is there is that in that particular university, one entire sort of department is air defense, which is looked after by the Almazante itself. Right from 16, 17, 18 years old, right up to the 4 years of graduation, he is eating, drinking, and doing research in that particular field. They are picked up the best of them, by the people. The brightest of them are sent outside for the studies, get back, and slowly they have been able to create a ecosystem. Here it is absolute government involvement, and because there is nothing which is known as private in Russia, if I may say so. So that's absolute private. So where they have lacked, as far as Russia is concerned, is the electronics, conductors, and daily goods, which they found, even agricultural goods, which they could have easily done to in the European part of Russia, where there is a lot of time for the agriculture, a lot of months for the agriculture. Balance Siberia and all doesn't get that much of time, and there's a lot of water. It is blessed with the water. But slowly they are getting their act together, because they found it doing it themselves. It was cheaper for them to get it from or import it from Europe or China or South Korea or Japan at much lesser cost. So that is what they have things. So one thing that we can learn from Russia is that create an ecosystem where the industry, academia, the user, and the academia at a very early stage get integrated with each other. Each knows the requirement of each, and they start working towards that. Only then we will be able to create an ecosystem where we are able to produce the best in the world. And obviously, we don't have full technology, full cycle of technology for everything. And with such a huge country, one country can't give us full technology. So we have our relationship with the various parts of the world have to be very nuanced. Strategic autonomy we have been following, I think, has been a wonderful method where we have got the best of the many worlds, if I not say both the worlds, in many senses. And last 10 years or so, last 8, 9 years or so, uh, the changes that we have done in our education system to the new education policy, catch them young, all these things in the years to come will give us results. So I think I will leave it there.
Yeah, I think it's a process and it takes time for anything. Mr. Mano, would you like to add something to it?
No, I agree. I think it's a process, and I think we need to create an ecosystem. And I agree that takes time. But I think that we need to. The challenge, of course, in all of this is that increasingly, it's clearly looking like we are in an era where there is likely to be more war than in the previous decades. So we need to probably catch up much faster.
You're absolutely right. China was lucky; it had an era where there was no war, so it can develop peacefully. But we are forced. But surprisingly, we are doing quite well, because I think our industry is up to it, and we have money. It is not that we don't have money. It is only the culture, because private sector is quite robust. We have got 7, 8 big companies who are doing wonderfully well. So we can do.
I agree with the optimism, but that said, ever since I was a teenager, I've been hearing India spends 0.7% of its GDP on R&D, and most of that expenditure comes from the state. It does not come from private companies. I think private sector.
I think that needs to change. that needs to change, and probably that will come once the scale comes up. So that may. So we'll take few questions now.
Ma'am, you're mute, I think.
Mr. Thadani wanted to know the Chinese weapons platform and systems were put through the first battle test during Op Sindoor. They failed. In Iran, again, they failed. So what does China bring to the table at the SCO? So your comments.
So would you like to take this?
Yes.
So my sort of, I don't think the SEO is necessarily. I mean, at the SEO, what it brings to the table is that it's bringing its own security anxieties to the table, and it's trying to get those security anxieties addressed with regard to what they call the three evils: terrorism, extremism, radicalism. And I think that's what they're trying to get addressed in terms of Chinese weapon systems and platforms failing. I mean, look, there's a lot that we don't know about Operation Sindoor in terms of how, at least I don't know. So I wouldn't jump to the conclusion to say that systems have failed. Also in Iran, the war, yes, seems to have ended in some sort of a stalemate, right? Yes, Iran was for the wear, but that was when the Americans got involved to bomb certain sites. But I don't think we should, from an Indian perspective, you're facing a strategic challenge of the kind that we have not dealt with since the foundation of the Republic of India, the model Republic of India. You're facing a global power which is on your doorstep and which is demonstrating a certain degree of hostility. So I would not take it lightly. And look, if they fail and you didn't take them lightly, you were 10 times better prepared than you would have. So at least that's the mentality that we should have.
Absolutely, I agree. We should be prepared, and you never know what happens, because in today's world, the world is very unpredictable. Whatever said and done, Iran also had an attack on American base. Maybe it may be a signaling or something, but it did. So the unpredictability is there. We'll take another question. Peace with China is possible, but the entire ball is in China's court. And for that also, demarcations of border is necessary. Your views?
So if I could just take that, I think peace is an ambition for the long term. I don't think in the short term, which is the next 10, 15 years, we should be thinking about peace, because I think peace is going to be difficult. What we can think about is to try and arrive at some sort of a new understanding and new balance. The resolution of, like I said, the boundary issue resolution is not going to happen. I don't see it happening in the near future at all. I don't think Beijing has an incentive to resolve the boundary issue. If it did have the intention and the incentive, it would have probably done it early on in the since the election of the NDA government in 2014, because I think there was political will in India and even that leadership that had been expressed to try and address the issue. So I don't think Beijing has the incentive to try and resolve that. And I don't even think that the boundary issue is a fundamental challenge that we have with China. We've had the boundary issue, which was a problem, since the formation of the two countries in their modern avatars. But still, from 1988 onwards, till last decade or so, we were able to manage a balanced, somewhat normal relationship. The challenge is that there is a shift in terms of the global architecture, in terms of global dispersion of power, and China's own sense of its asymmetric advantage. So I think that needs to be addressed. You need to bridge the power differential. You're not going to do it in a year or 2 years or 5 years, and you're not going to do it yourself. So you will need partners to bridge that power differential. And to me, that is a game of perception. You need to change their perception. For that, you need capacity and you need partners.
This question was by Amitesh Behra, and General Mehra, would you like to add something to it?
And till the time these things are capacities and we bide our time and our capacity is built up, we need to manage that relationship, right? And through various by creating our own capacities and having, I should not say alliances, but having friendship with some other like-minded countries where these things are kept under check.
I think in a multipolar world, it is all about partnerships. Everybody is looking for partners, whether it is China, Russia, Turkey, Iran, which was coming up in a big way, or it is US, European Union. We find now there are a little bit of cracks, but still everybody is working towards partnership, and the one policy is becoming more transactional in that sense. So we have time for one last question. Akashika? Yes. This is US, Park, USCN. Okay.
US, China.
Binaries he's talking about. With probably a deep state in the background is clearly visible to any observer of global politics. What would be the relevance of SCO going forward? Yes, US, Park, and I mean, he's basically talking about the binaries. So we know that the binaries are there in SEO also. It is how you manage and how you move forward. And you have to be there to balance out the things. So, but what are your comments?
Very deep question, I should say. So yes, I mean, it's the national interest which every country looks forward to. Suddenly, a country which where the Osama bin Laden was found next to the army establishment has finds a favor with the solitary superpower of the unitary power of the world, and he's called for lunch and everything. The person who orchestrated that hideout, or if I may say, as ISI chief or something. So these things will continue, and what prompted that, if you go deeper, we'll also get to know that. So these things will continue in the background. Uh, and as I said earlier, Pakistan, due to its location, has a big advantage as far as nobody can ignore it. Problem is that, right? That is the one major issue that is there, and that will drive the geopolitics of this part of the world for the times to come. As far as SEO is concerned, I think SEO in this sense of security has a very not very high role. It's a limited role that we can have. But by being part of SEO, we know what are the aspects being discussed, and I think that is what the relevance of SEO is there as far as this aspect is concerned.
Yes. You get a platform to at least highlight the issues what are there. So that's it. Mr.
Whether
Mano,
they
would you
agree
like to
or
add?
not, whether you sign a statement or not, whether you don't sign on a paragraph, don't agree to a paragraph or not, that's besides. But yes,
No, but then you're highlighting
highlight
a
the
thing
issue.
that, see, it is not done. You
It
have
is
to, you can't have double standards. I mean, you can go on a platform and you can say, see, you're having double standards. I mean, that won't be there if you're not a part of it. Mr. Manoj, you would like to add to it?
So just broadly on any of these minilateral groupings, multilateral groupings, plurilateral groupings, an institution of such nature is only as useful as it serves the strategic interests of its largest core members. In the SCO, it is China and it is Russia. That does not say that others don't have interests. Of course they do. But the institution will sustain only when these two members want it to sustain, and these two members will push it in directions that they want, that they see that they're interested, and others will try and leverage as much as possible. Likewise, if you look at the BRICS, today we are hearing that Xi Jinping might not go to Brazil for the BRICS summit. That does not mean that the BRICS is irrelevant, but it also tells you that the institution serves an institutional purpose. It's an instrumental purpose that it serves. Beyond that, it doesn't. While you are there, you can use it to your ends. When it stops being useful, it stops being useful. So I wouldn't sort of worry too much about where the SEO is going. I don't care if it doesn't survive 5 years from now. Till it's served our end, it's fine. The Chinese and the Russians will likely decide whether it survives or it doesn't survive. And if they deem that it is valuable, it will continue to sustain. For us, in that process, we need to look at what is it, how can we leverage that institution, that platform, to further what our interests are, while, like I said in the beginning, keeping our expectations low.
I agree with you. It's an era of bilateral, multilateral, minilaterals, and we have to see where our interest serves the best and where we can be a partner to voice out the things what are required. So, thank you so much, Mr. Manoj and Major General Mehra, for a lovely podcast today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. And wonderful to know you, Mr. Manoj. Wonderful.
Same here, sir. Thank you. Thank you to meet you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank